Neighbors aren't people. They're plot twists waiting to happen with yard tools. 1. The Great Fence War of Maple Court. Some neighborhoods fight over property taxes. Maple Court went to war over a fence that was technically 4 inches, yes, inches, over the line. It began when Gary, a man whose personality is 90% lawn fertilizer, installed a fence exactly where the original survey said. His neighbor Linda, armed with binoculars and the righteous fury of someone who alphabetizes her spice rack, insisted the fence encroached on her side by the width of a moderately thick sandwich. The two engaged in a quiet suburban arms race. Gary raised the fence an extra foot for privacy, and Linda planted a row of towering hedges that looked like a green barricade preparing for D-Day. The feud escalated until both hired separate surveyors, who, beautifully, gave opposite measurements. The stalemate continues, and the street now calls the border zone the demilonized zone. 2. The porch light standoff of '09. Some neighbors fight with words, others use incandescent bulbs. In 2009, a man named Rick left his porch light on every night, claiming it deterred raccoons. His neighbor Barb said the glare shot directly into her soul and ruined her sleep. She asked him nicely to turn it off. Rick responded by installing a brighter bulb, just to be safe. Barb retaliated with blackout curtains, then added reflective panels to bounce the light back toward Rick's house like she was signaling aircraft. Rick, not to be defeated, swapped his bulb for a motion-activated floodlight, powerful enough to interrogate suspects. The standoff ended only when both accidentally triggered the floodlight at 3 a.m., blinding each other and forcing a truce in the name of shared optical safety. 3. The Lawn Ornament Cold War. This conflict began innocently, the way all future disasters do. Carol bought a tasteful lawn gnome. Her neighbor Doug, who had the competitive spirit of a reality show contestant, responded by purchasing a slightly larger gnome. Carol escalated with 2 gnomes and a flamingo. Doug countered with a flock of flamingos, a windmill, and a statue of a frog playing a banjo. By midsummer, both lawns looked like yard sale fever dreams. Tourists slowed down to take pictures. Delivery drivers refused to enter the block out of fear the decorations might come alive. The HOA eventually intervened with a 3-ornament limit, which both neighbors now circumvent by placing additional decor exactly on the property line. No one knows who's really winning, but both clearly lost long ago. 4. The hedge trimming hostilities. Some people trim hedges, others sculpt declarations of war. On Elmwood Lane, Henry kept his hedges perfectly squared, sharp enough that if you brushed against them, you'd need a tetanus shot. His neighbor, Pam, preferred a more natural and whimsical look, which is suburban code for feral. When Pam's hedge began migrating across the property line like a leafy invasion force, Henry trimmed the portion on his side back into a perfect square. Pam accused him of assaulting her botanical expression. Henry responded by shaping the edge into the word no. Pam answered by trimming hers to spell yes. Eventually, their hedges became passive-aggressive yard art. Stop. Never. Move. Gladly. The mailman still claims he once saw the shrubs spelling bring it. 5. The Battle of the Rogue Sprinkler. Every neighborhood has that one sprinkler system that behaves like a feral garden hose. In this case, it belonged to a man named Cliff. His sprinkler had one setting, sideways fire hose. Every morning at 6 a.m., it blasted directly across the property line, soaking his neighbor Tammy's walkway, flower beds, welcome mat, and occasionally Tammy herself when she wasn't caffeinated enough to dodge. Tammy asked him to fix it. Cliff insisted it was watering on a schedule. So Tammy set her sprinkler to retaliate at 6:05 a.m., with a pressure so strong it could strip paint. For 2 weeks, both systems blasted each other's property in a timed aquatic duel, creating the wettest, angriest front yards in the county. The standoff ended only when both accidentally drenched the UPS driver, who demanded a ceasefire before he started delivering packages by catapult. 6. The Christmas Decoration Arms Race. It started with one inflatable snowman. It ended with the neighborhood looking like Times Square after drinking too much eggnog. Brad put up a modest snowman on December 1st. His neighbor, Stephanie, countered with a reindeer. Brad added lights. Stephanie added a full nativity scene. Brad added a projector that sent animated snowflakes screaming across her garage. Stephanie retaliated with a 14-foot inflatable Santa that sounded like a jet engine filling with air. Soon, both lawns were so bright, the local power grid flickered whenever someone microwaved soup. Airplanes rerouted. Birds refused to fly overhead. Brad installed a musical display that played carols every hour. Stephanie countered with a louder speaker. By December 15th, the HOA threatened to fine them for creating a holiday-themed sensory assault, which only made them add more decorations out of spite. 7. The recycling bin. Turf Battle Recycling Pickup Day should be peaceful. Instead, it turned Oak Ridge Street into a battleground of blue plastic bins. Darren insisted everyone put their bins exactly 3 feet apart for optimal efficiency. His neighbor Rose preferred them lined up by color shade, light blue first, then dark blue, then the weird bluish one Darren bought at Costco. When Rose rearranged his bin to maintain aesthetic harmony, Darren marched it back into its original spot and wrote, "Property of Darren, do not touch on it like it was military equipment." Rose responded by labeling hers "Property of Rose, touch and perish." Soon, every bin on the street had warning labels, GPS trackers, and decorative duct tape borders. The trash collectors nicknamed it the Passive-Aggressive Parade and filmed it for their group chat. 8. The Great Grill Smoke Rebellion. Ah yes, the universal neighbor feud. Barbecue smoke. Kevin was a weekend grill warrior, the kind of guy who talked about mesquite like it was a religion. Every Saturday he smoked ribs until the entire street smelled like a Texas roadhouse. His neighbor Fiona, who claimed smoke interrupted her aura alignment, started complaining. First politely, then with homemade signs placed along the fence reading "No Smoke Zone." Kevin ignored them and added more wood chips, proudly claiming he was seasoning the neighborhood. Fiona escalated by running an outdoor fan pointed directly at his grill, blowing smoke back onto his own patio. Kevin countered by building a taller smoker chimney that launched a smoke plume into her open bathroom window. The feud only ended when a third neighbor hosted a cookout to negotiate peace, feeding them both until they forgot why they were fighting. 9. The mailbox migration crisis. Mailboxes usually stay put. That's their main job. But on Willowcrest Drive, 2 neighbors turned them into nomadic creatures. Carl insisted his mailbox sat exactly where the previous owner had placed it. His neighbor Denise insisted the mailbox was 2 inches onto her lawn, 2 inches she guarded like sacred ground. One morning, she dragged Carl's mailbox slightly left. Carl, outraged, dragged it back. The next day, it jumped 2 inches right. Soon, it was being repositioned daily, like a slow-motion hostage being moved to avoid detection. The mailman finally had enough and left a note that said, "Pick a spot, any spot. I'm too old for mailbox hide-and-seek." In a final act of diplomacy, Carl cemented it into place at midnight, and Denise retaliated by installing a solar spotlight that illuminated it like a Broadway star. 10. The mystery leaf blower. Sabotage. Every fall, suburban peace dies under the roar of leaf blowers. On Crestview Lane, the loudest offender was Mark, who treated fallen leaves like personal enemies. He blew them off his lawn with military precision and directly onto his neighbor Sheila's yard. Sheila politely asked him to stop. He pretended not to hear her, mostly because his leaf blower was still running. So Sheila hatched a plan. She bought a programmable electric leaf blower and set it to activate exactly 5 minutes after Mark started his. It blew the leaves right back. Soon the 2 yards were locked in an endless loop of airborne foliage, leaves flying like confused migrating birds. The neighborhood kids started placing bets on whose leaves would win. The war ended only when both accidentally blew the entire pile into the street, where the wind took it to an entirely new victim. 11. The Battle of the Backyard Floodlight. Nothing says, "I love my privacy," like installing a floodlight bright enough to summon Batman. Gerald installed one to keep raccoons away, though everyone suspected he just liked pressing buttons that illuminated the neighborhood like an alien landing. His neighbor Paula complained it shone directly into her bedroom at night. Gerald adjusted it slightly, meaning not at all. Paula responded by purchasing blackout curtains, and then a brighter porch light aimed right back at Gerald's house. The 2 lights created an accidental lighthouse effect that confused birds, irritated joggers, and made Google Maps temporarily think the block had a sports stadium. The stalemate ended when the power company showed up to investigate what they thought was a malfunctioning transformer. 12. The Recycling Spy Operation. Harold considered himself a recycling purist. 4 bins, color-coded, each labeled with a laminated chart. His neighbor Lisa was more of a just toss it in the blue one and pray kind of recycler. Harold couldn't take it anymore. He started inspecting her bin on recycling night, leaving sticky notes that said things like peanut butter jars must be rinsed and wrinkled foil is not acceptable. Lisa retaliated by adding increasingly random items to her bin: flip-flops, a spatula, a rubber chicken, just to watch Harold's soul leave his body. One night, Harold caught her in the act, and the two ended up in a full-blown debate about recycling ethics at 10 p.m., terrifying a passing jogger who thought he'd stumbled into a documentary about environmental extremists. 13. The shovel-lined skirmish. During winter, most people shovel to be kind. Doug shoveled to make a statement. After every snowfall, he carved a razor-straight line down the driveway border, his side pristine, his neighbor Terry's side resembling a snow-themed apocalypse. Terry accused him of making her half look bad. Doug claimed he was simply respecting natural boundaries. The next storm, Terry shoveled her side into an artistic swirl pattern that drifted exactly onto Doug's driveway. Doug responded by sculpting small snow walls along the line like he was preparing for a medieval siege. The mail carrier had to tiptoe between the icy battlements to deliver letters. Eventually, spring melted the evidence, but Doug still insists he won. 14. The patio umbrella incident. A simple umbrella should not cause conflict, but here we are. Claire loved relaxing on her patio under a cheerful yellow umbrella. Her neighbor, Vernon, claimed the umbrella's reflection in his kitchen window disrupted his morning tranquility and asked her to remove it. Claire refused. Vernon escalated by hanging a heavy curtain inside his kitchen window, then claimed that was now Claire's fault because windows shouldn't need curtains. Claire bought a bigger umbrella. Vernon installed a larger curtain. Soon it became a passive-aggressive size competition. Umbrella versus curtain, both growing like suburban kudzu. It only ended when a storm ripped Claire's umbrella out of the table and sent it flying, landing neatly in Vernon's yard. She insisted it was the universe making a point. 15. The bird feeder. War of Birch Street. Bird feeders usually attract chickadees, cardinals, and the occasional squirrel with commitment issues, but Betty's bird feeder attracted everything: birds, squirrels, raccoons, opossums, and once, according to photographic evidence, a confused neighborhood cat hanging from the chain like an action movie stunt double. Her neighbor, Ron, insisted the wildlife was destroying his garden and accused Betty of running a buffet for pests. Betty proudly agreed. Ron installed motion-activated sprinklers to deter the animals. Betty installed a taller feeder. Ron planted prickly shrubs. Betty added more seed. Soon the wildlife didn't even fear humans. They feared choosing the wrong yard. The ultimate showdown came when Ron woke up to find 14 squirrels lined up on his fence like furry troops preparing to invade. He surrendered that day and started feeding them peanuts just to keep the peace. 16. The wind chimes cease and desist. Martha adored wind chimes. The delicate tinkling, the soft shimmer of sound, the peaceful vibe. Her neighbor, Frank, described the noise as a metallic tantrum and filed an official complaint with the HOA titled Unlawful Airborne Noise Devices. Martha responded by installing more wind chimes: bamboo, metal, seashell, even one shaped like a tiny lighthouse. On windy days, her porch sounded like a spiritual awakening happening inside a hardware store. Frank retaliated with noise-canceling headphones, then a white noise machine pointed out the window. Neighbors reported hearing ocean waves fighting a wind chime orchestra. Eventually, a storm knocked the entire collection down in one dramatic crash. Frank claimed it was divine intervention. Martha called it weather-based discrimination. 17. The statues that started a scandal. Debbie installed 2 tasteful garden statues of cherubs by her walkway. Her neighbor, Carl, said they watched him and requested she turn them around. Debbie refused, so Carl bought a statue of a gargoyle and faced it directly toward her cherubs like it was challenging them to a duel. Debbie escalated with a Greek goddess statue. Carl responded with a giant concrete frog. Soon, both yards looked like competing mythologies fighting for dominance. Delivery drivers refused to walk between the statues after dark. Kids claimed the frog winked at them. After a storm knocked the frog over, Debbie sent Carl a sympathy note that read, "May your fallen amphibian rest in peace." The feud ended with both neighbors agreeing to stop summoning weird energies into the cul-de-sac. 18. The Amazon package hostage negotiations. Some neighbors steal packages, others ransom them. When a delivery driver left Tracy's Package on the wrong porch, the neighbor, Bob, decided to keep it for safety. Tracy asked for it back. Bob demanded proof it was hers. She showed him the shipping confirmation. He asked for a second form of verification. She gave him the tracking number. He claimed it wasn't enough evidence. It took 3 days of back-and-forth negotiations, including one handwritten note titled Terms of Surrender, for Bob to finally release the hostage package. The package contents? A $9 pack of dishwasher tabs. Tracy now sends all her deliveries to the Amazon locker down the street because it's easier to deal with a robot than Bob. 19. The backyard tree betrayal. Janet planted a lovely maple tree. Her neighbor Phil said the roots were planning an invasion. He insisted they were creeping under the property line with hostile intent. Janet brushed it off until Phil hired an arborist to interrogate the tree. The arborist, confused but professional, reported that the roots were normal. Phil didn't believe him and installed a plastic root barrier. Janet retaliated by naming the tree Phil Jr. and hanging a small wooden sign on it labeled Friendly Maple, not a threat. Phil, offended, demanded she rename it. Janet responded by decorating Phil Jr. for every holiday: Santa hat, Easter eggs, 4th of July ribbons, just to irritate him. The tree is now the most festive diplomat in the neighborhood. 20. The dog-walking spy network. Dogs love walks. Neighbors love gossip. Combine the two, and you get a suburban spy ring. On Maple Ridge, Linda accused her neighbor George of letting his dog walk suspiciously close to her lawn. George insisted she was imagining things, so Linda installed a ring camera aimed precisely at a 2-foot strip of grass. George, annoyed, altered his route to avoid the camera, so Linda adjusted the camera angle. Soon her entire porch looked like a low-budget security command center. Other dog owners joined the conflict, taking sides. Some began purposely walking their dogs only on George's lawn in protest. The feud got so ridiculous, the local pet store offered a neutral ground dog park day to encourage peace. It worked for 24 hours. 21. The car alarm Cold War. Sam drove an aging sedan with a car alarm that went off whenever a leaf touched it. A bird sneezed near it, or someone thought about wind. His neighbor Jordan begged him to fix it. Sam said, "It's a sensitive system." Jordan said, "So is my sanity." When the alarm went off at 2 a.m. for the 5th time in a week, Jordan retaliated by recording the noise and playing it back at Sam's front door during daylight hours with a Bluetooth speaker. Sam defended his car's honor by parking it closer to Jordan's bedroom wall. Jordan countered with a strategically positioned inflatable tube man that blocked Sam's preferred parking spot. Peace was finally reached when the car died permanently, a victory Jordan celebrated like the fall of a tyrant. 22. The grill smoke treaty breakdown. Tina considered herself the neighborhood's grill master. Her ribs, her brisket, her chicken, she claimed they were award-winning, though no one was sure which award or who judged it. Her neighbor Jeff said her smoke smelled like burnt socks dipped in barbecue sauce. After one particularly smoky Sunday, Jeff demanded she move her grill. Tina refused. Jeff set up a smoke measurement station on his fence using a box fan, a humidity sensor, and a paper plate. Tina retaliated by switching to hickory wood, doubling the aroma. Jeff opened all his windows to prove a point, nearly fumigating himself. Eventually, the HOA issued a smoke limit rule written so vaguely no one understood it. Tina still grills. Jeff still complains. Nature continues. 23. The lawnmower revenge lap. Dennis prided himself on his perfect lawn. Straight lines, crisp edges, the kind of grass that looks photoshopped. His neighbor Cheryl mowed whenever she felt like it. Morning, noon, occasionally midnight. Dennis politely asked her to choose reasonable mowing hours. Cheryl heard, "Please mow directly at sunrise with the loudest machine available." She did exactly that. Dennis retaliated by mowing just one lap around Cheryl's lawn border, perfectly neat, making her yard look like it had a decorative green moat. Cheryl answered by letting her grass grow just tall enough to blow over onto Dennis's lawn. The street watched silently as the lawn rivalry escalated, precision versus chaos. It finally ended when Cheryl's mower broke, and Dennis, sighing dramatically, loaned her his best one. She brought it back with a fresh scratch. The feud continues. 24. The kayak in the driveway incident. Sandra bought a kayak despite living nowhere near water. Her hobbies were none of the neighborhood's business. She stored it in her driveway like a proud, outdoorsy symbol. Her neighbor, Martin, declared it visual clutter and insisted kayaks belonged near bodies of water only. Sandra responded by placing a beach chair and umbrella beside it, calling the setup her land dock. Martin complained to the HOA, who sided with nobody because they couldn't find the word kayak anywhere in the bylaws. So Martin escalated by placing orange construction cones around the kayak to warn passersby of a tripping hazard. Sandra, delighted, added a fake lifeguard tower made from an old step stool. The entire block now just refers to that part of the street as Sandra's waterfront district. 25. The scented dryer sheet disaster. Janice loved using extra scented dryer sheets, the kind that smell like a lavender field having a panic attack. Her neighbor, Caleb, hated it. He claimed the smell drifted into his yard and gave him nostalgia migraines. He asked Janice to switch to unscented sheets. Janice suggested Caleb switch to a different yard. The next laundry day, Caleb hung a sign on his fence reading, "Stop perfuming the neighborhood." Janice responded by selecting the strongest dryer sheet she could find, Midnight Lavender Storm, and drying 3 loads in a row. The scent cloud rolled across the block like a floral weather event. Neighbors later described it as being hugged too hard by a gift shop. Caleb eventually bought an air purifier for his patio. 26. The above-ground pool hostility pact. When Karen installed an above-ground pool, she thought the neighborhood kids would be thrilled. Instead, her neighbor Paul declared it an eyesore and said it ruined his view of the street, because apparently watching traffic is more relaxing than water. Karen decorated the pool with string lights and floating flamingos to make it festive. Paul said the lights were retina damaging. Karen put up a small privacy wall so he couldn't see in. Paul responded by building a platform deck just tall enough to peek over it, claiming it was for bird watching. Karen retaliated by putting giant inflatable birds on the pool. Paul complained that they were too judgmental. At this point, everyone agrees the real entertainment isn't the pool. It's Paul watching the pool. 27. The compost bin crisis. Ed was proud of his new compost bin. His neighbor Linda claimed it smelled like a hot salad left in a car. Ed insisted it was eco-friendly aroma. Linda said it was nature's dumpster. When flies started showing up, Linda snapped and placed citronella candles along the property line, making her fence smell like a summer picnic gone wrong. Ed added a second compost bin just to annoy her. Linda attempted diplomacy by offering him a sealed rotating compost drum. Ed refused because real compost breathes, which sounded creepier than he intended. The conflict ended only when a raccoon broke into both bins and redistributed compost across both yards like a messy peace offering. 28. The solar panel reflection. War Dave installed solar panels on his roof and felt good about saving the planet. His neighbor Sharon, however, claimed the panels reflected sunlight into her kitchen, creating what she called aggressive streaks of laser brightness. Dave claimed she was exaggerating. Sharon demonstrated by placing a mirror on her fence that reflected the glare back onto Dave's patio. Dave responded by adjusting his panels to a slightly different angle, one that somehow made the reflection even worse. Sharon countered by setting up a fold-out shade wall around her deck. Dave accused her of blocking the airflow that cooled his house. The son watched silently while 2 adults fought over photons. 29. The borrowed ladder hostage situation. Ted borrowed his neighbor Greg's ladder for one quick fix. 3 months later, the ladder had become a permanent resident of Ted's garage. Greg asked politely for it back. Ted claimed he was still using it. Greg threatened to buy a new ladder and bill him. Ted threatened to cut off access to the shade tree Greg enjoyed during summer. Neither wanted to escalate to open conflict, so Greg left a ransom-style note taped to Ted's door. Return the ladder or face consequences. Ted, amused, zip-tied the ladder to his fence and called it an art piece. Greg retaliated by placing traffic cones around the ladder labeled crime scene. A passing jogger thought it was real. Ted finally returned the ladder, but now Greg writes his name on everything. 30. The sprinkler runoff rebellion. Every morning, Maya's sprinklers created a small river down the sidewalk, an annoying but harmless suburban stream. Her neighbor Oliver, however, claimed the runoff rearranged sediment in front of his house. Maya told him it was just water, not the Mississippi. Oliver bought a moisture meter to track the groundwater levels. Maya ignored him. Oliver started sending her daily text updates titled "Today's Infiltration Report." Maya laughed so hard she saved them. One day, Oliver built a tiny sandbag wall along the curb to divert the runoff. Maya filmed it and sent it to the family group chat, where it instantly became a meme. Eventually, Oliver removed the sandbags after a kid on a bike mistook them for a ramp and performed an accidental stunt show. 31. The Halloween Decoration Mutiny. Every year, Doug went all out for Halloween. Fog machines, spooky music, life-size skeletons wearing actual thrift store outfits. Across the fence lived Claire, who preferred quiet, tasteful fall decor, pumpkins, mums, and zero screaming animatronics. When October rolled around, Doug unleashed a 12-foot skeleton wearing sunglasses. Claire declared it a seasonal monstrosity. Doug added a voice box that shouted, "Hey neighbor," every hour. Claire retaliated by placing a row of serene but passive-aggressive scarecrows facing his yard, arms crossed like judgmental farmers. Doug responded with motion-activated ghosts that cackled whenever someone walked by. By the time Halloween arrived, the cul-de-sac had turned into a turf war between Horror Theme Park and Martha Stewart's front porch. Kids loved it. Adults took sides. Claire still claims her scarecrows won on dignity. 32. The Driveway Chalk Uprising. Kids love chalk drawings, flowers, hopscotch, whatever their sugar-fueled minds invent. But Gary, a man who treated his driveway like a museum exhibit, insisted chalk permanently damaged concrete. When his neighbor's kids drew a rainbow that drifted half an inch onto his driveway, he washed it off with the intensity of someone removing evidence from a crime scene. The kids retaliated with more chalk, adding a unicorn, a castle, and a giant arrow pointing at Gary's garage labeled Grumpy Kingdom. Gary filed an HOA complaint. The HOA responded by sending him a brochure explaining that chalk is chalk. Gary now avoids that side of the street entirely, lest he be ambushed by another unicorn. 33. The Garden Hose Boundary Battle. Elise's garden hose naturally coiled itself onto her neighbor's driveway every time she watered her lilies, like a passive-aggressive serpent seeking new territory. Her neighbor, Tom, claimed the hose was trespassing and that water droplets were eroding the structural integrity of his driveway. Elise laughed. Tom did not. Tom drew a chalk line to define acceptable hose range. Elise decorated the hose with googly eyes and placed it so the eyes stared directly at Tom's porch. Tom escalated by building a tiny wooden fence, no taller than a shoebox, along the property line specifically to block the hose. Elise simply picked the fence up and moved it 2 inches every morning. Tom nearly lost his mind. 34. The Fence Paint Catastrophe. Amy decided to repaint her fence a charming shade of seaside almond. Her neighbor, Jake, declared the color visually aggressive and said it clashed with his warm oatmeal siding. Amy continued painting. Jake retaliated by repainting his side of the fence a darker shade to restore visual harmony. Amy painted her side again. Soon, the fence had more layers than a lasagna. At one point, Jake built a temporary barrier so he could paint without Amy interfering. Amy painted the barrier. The paint war ended only when winter arrived and froze their brushes. The fence now looks like an abstract art installation titled Two Neighbors Slowly Losing It. 35. The Motion Sensor Petocalypse. Brian installed a motion sensor light so sensitive it turned on if a moth sneezed. His neighbor, Olivia, owned 3 cats who adored midnight adventures. Every night, the light flickered on and off like a disco for felines. Olivia asked him to adjust it. Brian refused, claiming it protected his tools. Olivia bought reflective collars for her cats. The light now activated with twice the intensity. Neighbors claimed it looked like angry strobe lighting for confused raccoons. Finally, a cat knocked the sensor crooked, and the light pointed straight into Brian's garage, where it stayed on for 3 days. Electricity bill, $143, piece achieved. 36. The Recycling Bin. Space Race space in front of the curb was limited, and 2 neighbors, Harry and Melissa, engaged in a weekly battle for optimal bin placement. Melissa liked her bin exactly centered on her property. Harry liked his exactly centered. Their driveways were narrow. Chaos was inevitable. Each week, Melissa would move her bin slightly earlier than necessary to secure space. Harry would nudge it over a few centimeters. Melissa nudged it back. At one point, both bins ended up side by side in the middle of the road, blocking traffic and causing a small neighborhood traffic jam. The trash collectors, exhausted by the drama, finally placed both bins in the same spot as a lesson. It did not work. 37. The Backyard Movie Night Rebellion. Stacy loved hosting backyard movie nights with a projector and popcorn. Her neighbor, Craig, loved silence and insisted her movie nights polluted the audio environment. One night during a showing of Back to the Future, Craig played classical music from his porch at full volume, creating a chaotic mashup of Mozart and time-traveling DeLoreans. Stacy raised her speaker volume. Craig raised his. Eventually, the entire block became an accidental DJ battle between Beethoven and 80s cinema. Neighborhood teens dubbed it the Popcorn Rave. The HOA emailed both a noise unity notice, which solved nothing. 38. The Recycling Return Rampage. When Dana picked up her delivered packages, she flattened the boxes and placed them neatly in her recycling bin. Her neighbor Ron did not flatten anything, leading his bin to overflow like a cardboard volcano. One windy day, Ron's boxes blew into Dana's yard. Dana returned them by neatly stacking them on Ron's porch, organized by size. Ron, offended by the implied judgment, placed them back in her driveway with a note reading, "Not my problem." Dana responded by labeling each box with a post-it that read, "Yes, it is." Eventually, the entire cul-de-sac began using Ron's porch as a recycling drop-off point. Ron now flattens his boxes like a changed man. 39. The Holiday Wreath Showdown. Maggie hung a modest holiday wreath on her door. Her neighbor, Elise, hung a massive wreath bigger than her actual door. Maggie got a bigger one. Elise leveled up again. Soon, both doors were entirely obscured behind garlands, ribbons, and pine cones. Delivery drivers had to knock on windows because the doors were inaccessible. When Maggie installed a battery-powered wreath with jingling bells, Elise followed with a wreath that lit up, rotated, and played music. The escalation ended when a bird mistook Elise's wreath for a nest and delivered a full, natural rebuke from the animal kingdom. 40. The Snowblower Arms Race. In the winter, Mike proudly used his industrial snowblower, something that belonged more in a parking lot than a cul-de-sac. His neighbor, Anna, shoveled by hand and accused him of weaponized snow displacement. Mike's snowblower blasted snow onto Anna's driveway like a frosty missile launch. Anna responded by shoveling it back. The entire winter became a freeze-and-fling battle until Mike mistakenly blasted his own porch, burying his delivery packages like archaeological artifacts. Anna helped dig them out. The truce lasted until next winter. 41. The Parking in My Shade Crisis. Karen hated when anyone parked even partially in front of her house, especially under her shade tree. One day, her neighbor Phil parked his car an inch under the tree branch. Karen left a note reading, "Move or pay rent for the shade." Phil moved his car 1 millimeter. Karen escalated to daily photo documentation with timestamps. Phil mocked her by leaving a lawn chair under the tree instead, claiming the chair now held the lease. The HOA finally asked both to cease shade-related disputes. 42. The Lawn Flamingo Rebellion. Alan placed one tasteful flamingo on his lawn. His neighbor, Deb, said it lowered property values. Alan, seeing an opportunity for mischief, added a second flamingo, then a third. Within a week, the flock reached 27 birds in various poses, dancing flamingos, reading flamingos, one holding a tiny margarita. Deb reported the avian infestation. The HOA allowed only 3 flamingos, so Alan moved excess flamingos to the exact property line, staring directly into Deb's yard. Deb closed her blinds permanently. 43. The Power Washer Provocation. Tina bought a new power washer and gleefully cleaned her driveway every Saturday at 7 a.m. Her neighbor Rick, who slept late on weekends, found the noise equivalent to a jet engine bathing itself. Rick retaliated by mowing his lawn early Sunday morning. Tina responded by pressure washing her fence, again at sunrise. Soon the weekend became an acoustic battle of early morning machinery. It ended when Tina's power washer malfunctioned and sprayed her entire front porch with muddy water. Rick loaned her his hose. The feud went dormant until spring. 44. The Garden Gnome Redistribution Program. Becky adored garden gnomes. She treated them like her ceramic children. Her neighbor Kyle disliked them and called them creepy little spies. One night, a storm knocked over several gnomes, and Becky saw Kyle picking them up. She thanked him. He muttered something incoherent. The next morning, all her gnomes were rearranged. Some sat on her porch, one perched on her mailbox, another stared directly into Kyle's living room window. Becky insisted she hadn't moved them. Kyle blamed Becky. Becky blamed Kyle. But deep down, both suspected the neighborhood teenagers. Now, every storm leads to a new mysterious rearrangement. Both neighbors live in mild fear of the gnome's next move. 45. The fence-side herb smell controversy. Nora grew herbs, basil, mint, rosemary, on a small fence-side garden. Her neighbor, Trent, complained the smell was overwhelmingly herbal and interfered with his neutral air preference. Trent filed a complaint. The HOA ignored it. Nora planted more herbs. Trent bought an air meter and waved it around like a ghost hunter detecting oregano. Nora invited him to dinner. Trent refused, claiming the food would be too fragrant. Later, Trent built a small wind barrier. Nora planted taller herbs. Trent surrendered when his wind barrier blew over during mild weather. 46. The watering can stalemate. Julia's watering can was a charming vintage blue metal piece. Her neighbor, Sam, insisted it was rusting near his property and attracting ants. Julia responded by placing it on a decorative garden stand farther onto her lawn. Sam moved the stand back a few inches when she wasn't looking. Julia moved it forward. It became a daily ritual, sometimes the only exercise. Either of them got. One day, Julia zip-tied the watering can to a stake. Sam retaliated with a passive-aggressive note taped to the stake. The watering can remains in place like a monument to stubbornness. 47. The porch swing vibration dispute. Molly installed a porch swing for relaxing summer evenings. Her neighbor, Vince, insisted the gentle squeaking vibrated through their shared fence. Molly oiled the hinge. Vince said the silence felt ominous. Molly swung anyway. Vince installed a vibration sensor to prove the swing was disturbing his structural peace. The sensor showed nothing. Vince claimed Molly had tampered with it. Molly bought a second swing and put it closer to the fence. Vince threatened mediation. Molly offered lemonade. Vince refused. The swing still squeaks, and Vince still complains to anyone who listens. 48. The Ultimate Lawn Ornament Showdown Finale. It began with one simple statue, a metal rooster. Harmless, quirky, nothing unusual. But Ron, the neighbor, claimed the rooster challenged his masculinity and demanded it be removed. Gloria refused and added a chicken. Ron added a scarecrow pointing at her yard. Gloria added a cow. Ron added a tractor tire painted like the American flag. Gloria added a miniature barn with actual working lights. Soon, both yards looked like competing farm-themed theme parks. Tourists stopped to take photos. Google Maps labeled the block local attraction. The HOA finally intervened, but each rule they issued only inspired new decorations. In the end, Gloria installed a full rooster weather vane on her roof, declaring victory. Ron saluted it silently, admitting defeat. Peace was restored until spring. So, which neighborly meltdown earned the crown of suburban stupidity? Your turn. Vote below.